Yes, here we are. So just really a kind of quick briefing. Hopefully you'll all, you'll have had a look obviously at everything that's on the website. So this is just a recap, and then we can delve more quickly into the questions. So who is Catalyst? For those of you who are not really familiar with our work, who haven't really worked with us before, we're a charitable network. We're incubated by CAST. And essentially we exist to help the voluntary sector to strengthen its digital capabilities. So we're an open project, meaning that everything we do is kind of done in a kind of open contracting and sort of very collaborative way. And this includes this funding and this program. So as digital partners, you'll kind of be part of this open contracting process where the briefs are open for everyone to kind of pitch. And so this is part of trying to catalyze better ways of working between digital agencies and charities, I guess. So this is for the discovery process. So as you might have seen, the funding covers both the discovery phase and the development phase. So in terms of the discovery phase, we're really talking about a learning journey for the charities to go through. So this is for charities who are at a very early stage in their thinking and in their actual digital practices. And for those of you who are familiar with some of our services, we have something called the Design Hub. So we're kind of thinking about this as something similar to the Design Hub. And the resources from that can actually be made available for delivering this program, but obviously you've indicated interest in taking your own approach. So in terms of what this consists in is basically working with charities to define their problem. So because they're at a very early stage, very often we'll hear from them that they would like to do something, but they're not quite sure about how to go about it or where to start. So it's defining the problem, it's identifying solutions with them, it's supporting them to work with their users. So really thinking about the approach to digital rather than just jumping into the solution immediately. So we're looking for essentially organizations and agencies who are experienced in leading those kinds of we call it a learning journey or a learning program. So who have experience in working with social organizations. So having some sort of awareness of the challenges and the needs that they might be facing. Supporting them obviously through the discovery phase, and by that we don't really mean just kind of using discovery tools and having all these kind of tools and sort of processes kind of there for them to use, but also kind of taking them through the learning process itself and kind of almost like a trainer basically. So trying to help them think in that mindset. You'll be working with cohorts of organizations. So we're thinking 8 to 10 organizations per cohort. So it's really also how to kind of, I guess, make the most use of that program as a program for a cohort. So not working directly with individual charities, but kind of also sort of amplifying the value that there is for them from working in cohorts. And then finally, I've talked about that a bit, but delivering that learning piece and that learning journey to help them support their capability building. So for the discovery phase, and then potentially for, thinking about development later. So yeah, that slide, it's just to say that essentially it's kind of an agile, iterative process rather than, kind of going straight to a sort of fully fledged solution. Again, similar kind of just a agile, flexible way of working. And in terms of the timelines, so it's a 20-day kind of sort of program, so 4 weeks roughly. It kicks off on the 28th of September, ends on the 19th of October for the actual kind of learning bit. And then there's a playback, what we call a playback, which is essentially playing back the learnings and the outcomes from that process. So which is in the final week. You'll be working with cohorts, as mentioned, and then there'll be an opportunity to pitch for the development phase. So we have a separate route where organizations who have already experience in discovery and have a clear idea of what they want to see as a solution can sort of apply immediately for development. But then the organizations who will be going through the discovery phase, at the end of those 4 weeks, they will have an opportunity to think about development. And as partners, we would encourage you to kind of support them in that, and they'll be asked to submit a brief essentially. So, and obviously for partners, there is an opportunity there as well to kind of pitch for that development phase through the open projects process. So that kind of is how it looks like, it would look like in your calendar. So the sort of initially the 3 weeks kind of learning, and then in green, you've got the playback week. And then finally, the application process for the development phase. So I think we've got, we can jump into questions now, unless there's anything from Ellie or David at this point.
I think that's good from me. If you have questions that have come up from that, then add them in the Slido. And we have a few questions that people raised earlier as well that we're going to sort of start off with. So our first question was, how have organizations participating over the last few months found getting users in place for research and/or skateboard testing in the 4-week timescale? Skateboard testing, if anybody hasn't come across that term, is kind of another word for MVP, minimum viable product. So I think that is always a challenge, and it's a good one to raise, that getting users in place for research and testing in a 4-week timescale is tough. What we have done is made the charities who are applying to this program aware upfront in their application that that's something that will be expected. So there is an expectation that they will have thought about how to recruit users for the particular problem area they would like to address on this program. So I think that's as far as we can sort of address it in advance. That's kind of where we've got to really with that. And I think given that it doesn't actually kick off until the 28th of September, they do have a little bit of time as well from the time when they will hear if they've been successful or not to the time when they actually start the program to actually get some of that stuff in place as well. And during that time, we would expect the digital partners that each cohort is assigned to be able to be kind of connected and communicating with those organizations, and maybe set any initial requests or expectations for further through the learning journey as well. But yeah, we'd really love to see some creativity and responses in your applications as well as to how best to support that, because we completely recognize that is always a big challenge, getting users for research and testing in short projects. The second question we had was, are CAST looking for partners to develop their own discovery workshop process specifically for this project, or would you prefer that we use the design hop format? And then in brackets, we are familiar with running discovery workshops and have also helped facilitate design hops in the past, but don't currently have our own existing workshop format that fits the brief. We can design or develop one if preferred by CAST. So this brief is ideally for somebody who has got a format that has been tested in some way. So if it would mean designing a new learning program format from scratch, then it's probably not quite right for you, because we recognize that actually it's quite a different thing to do discovery with charities as it is to teach discovery to charities and enable them to do it for themselves. So really kind of some experience in how best to teach that is essential. And if you haven't kind of design something along those lines yourselves, then probably delivering a design hop where that content and format is kind of a bit more tried and tested would be the better option for you. We don't have a general preference as to how many organizations do design hops versus something different, and part of throwing this open to the rest of the network to provide other alternative responses is because design hops are, we recognize, just one way of taking charities through this process, and every different organization has their own kind of take on this, their own flavor. So yeah, we're really looking forward to seeing other responses to that. But if you don't feel like you've got something that has been tested with organizations already, then feel free to just deliver a design hop and we'll give you some support around that specifically as well. The next question was, to what extent does the format need to have been tested before? I think I might have just answered that. Can elements have been tested individually? I guess this is kind of your call to an extent. If you feel like each of the elements have been pretty well tested individually and it's just a case of stringing them together and you're pretty confident in the way that you're stringing them together will be a coherent learning process and will take into account the kind of cadence for charities development and their the kind of capacity restrictions that they might have on both their time and their headspace, then by all means string some different components together. So I think that'll probably be down to each individual as to how confident you are that each of those components would work as a whole. But I don't see a problem with that in principle. The next question we have, are you expecting any difficulty in the organizations finding time to attend and deliver their own discovery project? It's great that there's a grant, but that doesn't get around people being taken away from day jobs. Can some of the agency's time potentially be used to bolster capacity? Great question. Yes, we are anticipating capacity challenges because certainly at the moment, all of the work we've done with social organizations has thrown up this as a real issue that everybody's extremely tightly stretched at the moment. And equally acknowledge that giving a grant doesn't necessarily help them free up that time, but we have asked the charities to commit a minimum of 20 days on their side. So there is an expectation that whether that is one person full-time or a number of people across the team subbing into different parts of the learning journey, then they will be committing 20 days in total. So we do fully still expect them to be doing the rest of their jobs and kind of trying to balance that, and that will be a challenge. So that's something worth bearing in mind. In terms of an agency being able to kind of bolster the charities capacity, I'd just say it's worth bearing in mind that if you have a cohort of 8 to 10 organizations, that's going to be very difficult to do across the board with all of them. So where it might be a kind of ad hoc process where you could sort of step in and support a particular organization that's struggling to keep up, then that might work and that might be sort of feasible, but I wouldn't build it into the sort of design of your actual application, just because that's probably going to stretch you quite thin to give really deep individual support to each of the organizations. But again, we're really interested to see how people respond to this brief, really. And if you feel that you've got some great evidence from work that you've done in the past that in fact you could fit in within this time frame and the budget allowed and the capacity allowance for the charities, quite a lot of deep working, then by all means pitch it and we'll have a good review and see what we can do, because yeah, appreciate there's a heck of a lot of expertise out here as well. The next question here is, how do you expect the recruitment of research participants to happen within this short time frame? I think that's a similar question to what we said earlier. Just charities having their heads up as early as possible is going to be helpful for that. The next question, are you expecting any difficulty in the organizations finding time to attend and deliver their own discovery project? Again, that sounds like many of the same concerns being raised. So Yes, I think we can probably safely say that out of your cohort of 8 to 10, were you to be successful and to deliver one of these programs, there would definitely be some capacity challenges along the way. So anticipating those and having a sense of how best to help the charities participating to manage their time effectively and get the most out of the program would be really great to see in your applications. And then another question here. New ones from Slido. Would this program go as far as initial definition work, e.g. crazy eights, sketching, research synthesis, prototyping? How are you defining discovery? Excellent question. So I think the main thing that we need charities to have done in this phase is just really define the problem area that they're looking to work on and understood it from a user's perspective. That's kind of the core elements here. If they get as far as sketching and prototyping, well, not quite prototyping, sketching and sort of concept testing some solutions, then fabulous. But probably more important, I would say, is a really evidenced understanding of the problem that they're trying to address. Because if they go on to the development phase, they will need to submit an application which requires information around how well do you understand this area, what kind of user research have you done, what kind of surprising things have you learned from this user research process. So it's very much more focused around the learning about the problem area. And if you feel like part of that learning process is supported by getting people to think kind of creatively about how best to solve some of those problems or to address them, then by all means add that in. But I think that will probably be down to each preference. In our design hop format, for example, we do a bit of that to kind of show organizations the whole arc of the process and give them a little taster of kind of what comes next and get them to think about how to prioritize different solution ideas. But it doesn't go as far as actually kind of building things to test with. It's much more just sort of the concept of how to do that. So hopefully that answers that one. Next question, should the program be delivered to all of a cohort at once, or can we form clusters of 2 to 4? Yeah, interesting question, actually. I think that's it's not something we've kind of got a strict rule around, to be honest. I'd be interested in your applications and rationale for different ways to deliver this. Yeah, I think that's all I'll say on that one. I think as long as you've got some clear rationale and some evidence for why you think one way or another way would be better, then great, really interested to hear that. With 6 agencies running different programs, would you prefer the programs to be similar or the same to ensure consistency? I think in general, we have a principle around Catalyst that we welcome a real diversity of approaches. So yeah, I think that's why we haven't just said, here's a course format that we would like people to deliver, because we recognize there's loads of different ways to approach this and that there's real value in some of these different approaches. The one thing that will need to be consistent is at the end of the process, charities will probably have about 1 week at the end of the 4 weeks to decide whether they would like to either continue into the development phase and write a brief for further work. And by development, I should clarify that we don't necessarily mean tech development. We could mean if the problem has identified that they need internal training or their board needs upskilling, then it could be strategic support for the board. That could be the thing that they get development funding to do. So we're absolutely not assuming that digital development, tech development is the answer here. But they will get to decide, yeah, whether they kind of go for additional funding for that, or in fact, perhaps if they've identified that they need a bit more internal work first, and that their main challenge is around stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management, then they'd be developing a kind of a roadmap and a process to go about doing that instead. So that's something where the digital partner would need to kind of support the organizations going on either of those 2 routes and kind of help them identify which route would be best for them. And at that point, if they go to the developing a brief for further work and to feed into the development program applications, then there's quite a there is a completely consistent brief template that they would need to fill out. So that's kind of the only point where we would need absolute consistency, but the journey for how they get there is completely down to you. And then next question, the training would be full-time for the participating third sector organizations, but what are the expectations of contact hours versus independent learning? Again, excellent question. That is down to each of your suggestions based on what you've done before that you found works really well. And again, part of why we welcome this diversity of approaches, we'd love to see different suggestions for that, because they don't have a fixed set of contact time expectations, if that's the question. And I think it would be really interesting to kind of see a variety of approaches suggested here. So yeah, whatever you found works, add to the application. Next question, what is the criteria to form each cohort? Would each cohort be defined based on level of digital literacy area challenges? Great question. We should definitely clearly clarify this in some of our documentation. So the cohorts are being kind of grouped quite loosely by their area, their level of digital understanding. So that's why in the application for your discovery learning programs, we ask you to kind of identify what level of existing digital maturity do you think this would be appropriate for. And it might be that you think actually this could work for anyone at any level, or it might be that you think, oh, actually we prefer to use slightly more technical language, it would be better for a slightly more advanced audience, and perhaps beginners should start with a different type of program instead. A different flavor of this same kind of process. So they'll be grouped by level, but nothing else. So you will have organizations of different sizes, different sector focuses in the mix with each other. And hopefully learning from each other's differences, which we found in the past has been a real advantage rather than having too many things try and kind of be aligned and the same in that one cohort. Next question, how much contact is expected for the charities to have with the org? I'm not, do you mean as in contact time with the digital partner? I think that's probably the same question as we had before, isn't it? In terms of contact time versus independent learning. We don't have a set number. We don't have a set way to split that. So again, that was down to you to explain in your application what you think is an appropriate level and which you think will work best for the charity's learning. Because there's a set of outcomes that we've identified that are in the brief, which we'd like charities to kind of work towards. And those are mostly kind of learning outcomes more than they are actually discovery outcomes, if you like. It's a bit of a mix of the two, but yeah, whichever you feel will help them achieve those learning outcomes. Okay, so apparently there's more questions, David tells me, but those are all of the ones that had a vote. Shall we open up to wider questions now? Fabulous. If anyone would just like to pop up their hand if they've got an additional question. It's a stunned silence. Harry.
How much time do you expect the training organisation to deliver over those 4 weeks? I understand that from the point of view of the organisations being trained, you don't have much of a fixed view as to how much effort they need to put in. But how much time do you expect this will take of the organisation doing the training?
Yeah, that's a good question. And just to clarify as well, I think on the charity side, I think what we've suggested is it equates to about 2.5 days a week on their side, of a couple of people on their side spending that time. So it's not nothing. You have got something to work with. On the partner side, I think we have suggested 2 people on the partner side working kind of full time on this to deliver the program. So that should cover quite a lot of back and forth and individual support, as well as preparing sessions, running sessions, follow up from sessions. Yeah. I think it should be stated in the brief. If it's not, we will double check and make sure that that's okay. Shaking heads. Okay, make sure that's added. Thank you.
I've not as far as reading the brief yet.
Great. Greg.
Can I follow on the back of that one? And if the general expectation is 2 people full-time, would you be open to applications of, let's say, 4 people part-time?
Yes, it's similar to the charities. It's kind of just a estimate for how long we think is a reasonable amount to deliver this effectively. So general man-hour calculation rather than a requirement for specific individuals to be present. So for example, if you have different kind of experts within your organization that would be better placed to lead different parts of the process, then absolutely suggest that. And that would be, yeah, definitely there's room for that flexibility. Kahi, I'm sorry, I've forgotten how to pronounce your name. Kahio, was that your?
Yeah, it's fine, no problem. Couple of questions, really. I mean, I think one of the questions I put up was that we may have more than one cohort. I mean, we do have a massive program which is funded by the lottery, and which is starting literally on the 28th of September. So we can, I think one of the key questions really is in terms of the capacity of these organizations to deliver or participate. And, they are very small charities, and already they're getting a lot of money for COVID funding, and they're delivering day-to-day services. And I think one of the biggest issues for them is time. They would love to recruit. I mean, I spoke to a couple of my members over the weekend, and each came up with the same issue, diverting existing staff to do this. So that's a big question. The second question, obviously, is if they have to recruit new people to, do this, it also requires management time. So that's one thing. From our part, obviously, one of the questions was about how much capacity do we need in terms of to deliver this. I think you said 2 full-time staff to deliver this, and that's up to March 2021.
So this is specifically to deliver the learning program itself. So that will just be 4 weeks.
Okay. So can I come back to my question I put? Was that do organizations have to go through the discovery phase before they go to development?
Yes, good question. So yes, we would expect all organizations who would be successful in applying to development to have been through a discovery phase. We don't stipulate that it has to have been this discovery phase. So we are expecting most organizations, just from our experience, to not quite be at the level where they can apply to development yet. So we don't expect them to apply for discovery, and then once they've gone through discovery, to then apply for the extra development funding. However, if they can show that they have actually done a really thorough discovery and got a really well validated problem area now, then there is another strand of funding open for them at the moment where they can skip that discovery learning program, and if they've essentially already done it, and then they can get that funding now. So there's 2 rounds of the development funding, one which is open now and one which is open later, predominantly for those that go through the discovery program.
Can you explain that? Because I think I might have missed that when I was reading the documents. So quite a lot of documents.
Yeah. So
because I mean, one of the things obviously is that we know our members very well. We've been doing a lot of surveys, and we're going to do another one for this funding in terms of where they are and all that. So I think the key question for me is, if they don't have to go through the discovery phase, how we can fit in some sort of a needs assessment kind of thing for them to go on to the development stage without needing to go through the discovery stage.
Yeah, so, I think, are you thinking of, just so I'm super clear, so it sounds like you've got a lot of members who themselves want to kind of go through this program as
We have a huge interest. We want to complement it with our current program. We have a huge training program to train 300 volunteers and 30 organizations nationwide in terms of benefits law and money and debt advice. So that's funded by the lottery. We just got funding from Trust for London in terms of helping 30 organizations in London with their comm strategies. So we thought this would be a complementary way of looking at it and saying, well, okay, but I'm just mainly concerned about the timeline, obviously, and also whether they need to jump through the hoop of the discovery to go. I mean, if we can do the needs analysis fairly quickly, then, you know, there's some way of looking at it, another way of saying, yes, they can go straight to, you know, development stage.
Yeah, so I guess that's probably, it'll be a little bit down to each organization and how confident they feel they are in understanding the problem area that they're looking to address. And as the kind of member organization, I suspect it might be worth just kind of clarifying that there are these kind of two opportunities, one of which shouldn't be seen really as kind of jumping through the hoops, but more as an opportunity to kind of spend that time really clarifying the area that they want to work on and begin kind of fleshing out part of the next steps that they would have to do anyway, really, if they started any digital development project. So I suppose I would encourage them to still look at the discovery phase, and if they get into the application and find that actually they don't have quite the right information, then still look at the discovery phase. But if they do feel confident for development and they get into the application and find that they don't have quite the right answers to fill some of the boxes, then to just go through discovery process. And if you're proposing to kind of run that learning journey for them, and that you have a kind of tried and tested model to do that already for the digital kind of service design side of things, then I think that sounds like it could be a really nice model. But we wouldn't be able to ensure that the same organizations that are in your member network would necessarily be the ones that were in the cohort with you, if that makes sense.
I'm not expecting everyone to be in the same cohort. Obviously, it all depends on how much interest there is. But I think the key question is that we have experience of doing a needs analysis for our members, and we have a very good understanding of where they stand in terms of their whole organizational capacity. So the key question for us is, you know, can we help them with going to the development stage with doing that needs analysis for them? Is that much more clear, or?
It is. I feel it's maybe it's slightly
happy to discuss otherwise, but you know, I think have a separate conversation as to.
I think a separate conversation might be useful on this, because I feel like it's a slightly different case to what a lot of the rest of the partners might be thinking about offering for their applications. So yeah, let's pick this up. But thanks for raising it, because it sounds definitely an interesting one to follow up. David, what other questions have we got?
I'm just aware of time. So there's a question from Bex that came up on the chat. What if we have two different programs for two types of digital maturity level? Should we put both approaches in via the same application?
Ooh, good question. I'd say it would depend how different they are. If they're essentially the same but with different kind of framing, then put the one in, but then explain that it's opportunities are for two different audiences, and maybe clarify there's a couple of divergent points as to how you might meet the different outcomes for the different audiences. If they're quite different, I'd suggest putting two applications in, because yeah, we'll be matching cohorts to specific programs. Is there another one?
Yeah, sorry, Doug, I did notice your hand. You've had 2 questions and you've been waiting for a while. Do you want to turn video on and share them with us?
Yeah, cheers. So the first one is the closing date is the 7th of September. Obviously, we need to look at our pipeline of work up until Christmas. When would we hear back after the 7th of September approximately?
Within, I think it's 1 week, is it? Let me just...
Oh, thank you. And the second one was that previous Catalyst funding has put together digital orgs to form teams. For example, I was working with Erica and Ped. It looks like that's not the case here. Can you just confirm that?
Yeah, so we're not suggesting that you would necessarily be working with other organizations to deliver this. You could do it on your own, but if you do want to work in partnership, that's also great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Doug, just to note a slight clarification from Reem in the chat. You'll hear back on the 18th of September, just to clarify that. We've got more questions inside it. We're running out of time. If you want to post any of those directly to us, please email us partners@wearecast.org.uk, and we are responding pretty quickly. So we'll make sure to get back to you. Yeah, and I think that's it, Ellie. Anything to add, Ellie and Reem, from your end? Thanks for your questions. Loads of really great ones, and we will be trying to capture all these in the Google Doc as part of the follow-up for those partners that couldn't make it.
Yeah, and yeah, any other questions, let us know. Basically, we're here to help and look forward to seeing your applications.